life, blessing us with Islam, blessing us with Iman. Thank you, Allah, for blessing us with Muhammad Rasulullah. Oh Allah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. Subhanallah. Today, I want to focus on some other social indicators and some other major issues in the world today which create human wrongs. The first of those is the destruction of the environment. The environment without none of us will be living on this planet. Such is the nature of this issue. I think everybody agrees, collectively, we need to do something about it and do something about it fast. So, when the Kyoto Accord was drawn up, and when President of the USA, Mr. George Bush, described it in March 2001 as being dead, I think the world got very worried. Of course, what happened after 2001 to the present day has been a total and utter catastrophe. All the more important that statement from George Bush, and this is not a political show, it's just that we are talking about real life issues, crisis in the world, that America is the largest creator, if you like, of pollution in the world. Their carbon emissions are rated at something in the region of 22%. However, their population remains at 4% of the world. Seemingly, we are living for today and today alone. We have complete and utter contradiction. The politicians, many of them, perhaps not including George Bush, are saying we've got to get rid of the greenhouse gases, we've got to do something about automobiles, consumption of energies, etc. We've got to have green-orientated energy sources, renewable energy sources, and the oil companies are doing something completely different. They are plowing hundreds of millions of dollars and pounds into new oil exploration, thus creating a massive contradiction. What we actually hear from the politicians and from the brokers is one thing. What we actually see in the works of the oil companies and the multinational corporations is totally another thing. Subhanallah. The Kyoto Protocol suggested that we would have to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases over a given period by 5%. However, scientists, UN scientists, have said we need to reduce the actual greenhouse gases in order to have a sustainable environment by 80%. And yet, George Bush declared the Kyoto Accord as being dead. Well, I think the human race is going to be dead if we don't do something about it. Exxon is one of the biggest culprits in the USA, but BP and Shell are, perhaps we should just refer, of course, to very large multinational corporations, oil giants, are by and large responsible for the impact on the environment. And the fact is that they are unabated, continuing with oil exploration, and they really don't give a damn. Subhanallah. And there's not much we can do about it, even though, you know, we live in westernized democracies. Not much we can do about it. Human rights or human wrongs. Now, the UN scientists have estimated that the temperature needs to grow by 0.1% every year for the next 50 years, whereby weather patterns will become unpredictable, an irreversible cycle will take place, whereby we will not really have much of a planet to write home about. In terms of the environment then, brothers and sisters, it's clear that we need to do something very drastically about the environment in order that we will, and our children and their children, will have a planet to live upon. The destruction of the environment is happening at an ever-increasing level, and it's up to the Muslims, again, in the Muslim lands, to show the way forward. So, subhanallah, without people speaking out against these evils, we will all suffer. It is said by some commentators that the war in Iraq, which is basically the next section of this talk, cost the US economy billions and billions of US dollars, and it continues to sap the resources of the world's economies, even though we know it wasn't a legal incursion into that country, Iraq. Instead, we could have funded global poverty for 6 years. We could have hired 2,658,000 school teachers to educate our children. Or we could have funded the World AIDS Rehabilitation Program for 15 years. Instead, we decided, or the British government and the American government, they decided to take action which took so many human lives. Instead of saving human lives, you're taking human lives. There's a lot of contradictions here. When it comes to nuclear war, we were told, and we are worried about the situation regarding a number of countries that have nuclear armaments. However, I'm sorry to tell you that the only country that has ever used a nuclear weapon on a civilian population in Hiroshima, of course, is none other than the United States. And only 250 military personnel were killed when the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were dropped. And the bombs resulted in something in between 100 and 300,000 civilian deaths. If we move now on to sanctions, which I've termed here as war without guns, Dennis Halliday, as first Assistant Secretary General of the Humanitarian Coordination in Iraq, in 1998, simply he said, we are in the process of destroying an entire nation. It's as simple and as terrifying as that. It's illegal and it's immoral. This is a UN bigwig. UN figures from 1989 to 1995, looking at infant mortality rates and comparing them from year on to year on, all the way through from 98 to 95, it was found that as many as 567,000 Iraqi children were murdered by us through sanctions. War without guns. Human rights or human wrongs. And who will be accountable for all of these deaths? Did we speak against it? It's not a question of taking arms up. It's a question of speaking with your tongue. And yet, we can't even open our mouths. We haven't even got the strength to command the good, forbid the evil. Subhanallah. However, on war, we were told more than 1400 years ago that there are certain rules for engagement. None other than Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who said, and I'll read it to you, I will give you 10 rules for engagement. Do not commit treachery or deviate from the right path. You must not mutilate the dead.